As many of you know, Elon Musk just recently acquired Twitter for $44 billion. In this episode, I explore all things Elon with my dear friend and business partner, Jason Kitamura. From Tesla to SpaceX, from robots to Neuralink, artificial intelligence, and the future of humanity. This was one of my favorite podcasts I've ever recorded, and my mind is blown away by the world we live in. The pinnacle for human innovation used to be a good crop yield. Now Elon Musk is set on making humans an interplanetary species. This is no longer Hollywood. This is real life. So I'm here with Jason Kitamura, entrepreneur, CEO of App Squad, one of my dearest business partners and friends. Thanks for coming on, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was awesome.
Of course. So Elon Musk and Twitter.
Elon Musk.
$44 billion.
It's a big deal.
The shareholders are all pretty happy. They kind of held the board accountable, and it wasn't going to go through at first. And there's questions of the business model there, being that someone's throwing around now, oh, wait, billionaires now can just buy in to a company and dictate what the future of it is going to be. I definitely have an optimistic look at Elon Musk and what future he's trying to bring to humanity. How do you feel about it, the purchase and whatnot?
I don't think people understand the magnitude of it, to be honest. I am pretty certain I know where Elon is going with this acquisition, and it's beyond what people are thinking. Essentially, I think what he's trying to do is create a universalized way to verify people. He always talks about, nothing's always like a secret or behind. He tells people it, but I don't think people are grasping the idea. First off, he talks about freedom of speech, right? So that's the biggest issue, is that he wants a platform where people are not going to be filtered. But there's really essentially no platform out there that does that. The biggest thing that holds companies back is verification of users. You have all these fake users. You have like I don't know how many Twitter accounts I've made in the past, or even that still exist out there. I can just hop onto one and say whatever I want and leave. And that's the problem right now. You get all this hate speech, all these like things that are controversial. A lot of them come from accounts that people don't really like, they're not tying themselves to. They're just saying it out there, right? If all the accounts are validated, like we know who you are and this is your only account that you can use for something like this, I think people are going to be a lot more careful on what they say.
Interesting. How do you think they can move forward with that validation?
He's been already dabbling with validation for a lot of these things, especially for like Tesla, like opening the cars. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future you can use your Twitter account to open your car door. That's the way the validation would work. I know he's been working on it, and if you have a solid validation system, essentially, just think of it this way. This is how big it is. People don't really realize that. The only thing that government's really for is kind of solidifying who you are, like getting your social security number, and controlling the financial system. So think of this. If who you are now became just who you are on Twitter, because that's validated, everybody knows that's a real account, that's you. Imagine the power. Somebody in the middle of the jungle in Africa can create an account, and now for sure, because we know how Elon is with crypto, that he'll tie a crypto payment element, and his past experience with PayPal, he has the means to do it. You tie a financial system to Twitter, so a validated account with payment. Now somebody in the middle of Africa can be as equal as somebody in the United States.
So plugging into the general economic system, this gives someone a digital access as long as they have internet.
We know who they are. They're validated. They could be paid. They could be validated who they are. You just said it. Internet access, Starlink.
He's got literally all of his...
Because that's the only thing that will put an end to what he's trying to do, is if ISPs and government block Twitter from certain areas. You already thought of that. Starlink is under his control. Even, I don't know if you guys heard when Russia tried to hack Starlink, when he sent over the Starlink units to Ukraine.
Yeah.
His people just like thwarted it like that. Like, okay, we got it. We got it figured out. You're good now. And everyone was like, what the heck? Like it would take like months for them to do that normally, but his system is so secure and his people are so on it that it was like literally instantly, it was like the threat was like taken care of.
That's insane.
So no one's going to take it down.
The power in his hands, and he's on record saying that, oh, all of my companies now, how people are seeing the integration and the potential future of them integrating, that's not on purpose, is what he said verbatim. If it was someone evil with that much power, that would be a scary thought. But since he has our trust, and a lot of folks think that he has our best intentions in mind, me being one of them, I'm hopeful. It sounds like from what you said that there's a general business, real big business venture in acquiring Twitter to now plug in so many people into the world economy.
It's not necessarily for financial though. I mean, I think at this point in his life, the financial aspect of it is like null. Like, who cares about the financial aspect? He's a disruptor. So literally, this is the most disruptive thing that he could have done. Because literally, if you have everybody validated on there, and now just think of it this way as that, you know how you could sign in with like Google and sign in with Facebook and stuff like that, but it's kind of like whatever. Now say you can actually validate your existence anywhere you go, like an ID with Twitter, because if he gets that validation process so like spot on, which I know that's the goal, then you can use it anywhere.
Dang. So he's going to have to marry with some sort of government agency, maybe even a new defined one at one point, because they're going to try.
Well, that's the thing.
To regulate it for sure.
It's a disruptor against government, for sure.
Yeah.
And not only that, honestly, if everything goes out the way it looks like it might, literally news and media is obsolete.
How so?
Because if you could validate the sources, because Twitter is already a source for news. But now if all the users are validated and people know that these news stories are coming from real people and they know who they are and if they trust that person, it's faster, more efficient, and more trustworthy because there's no filter to get it from Twitter than to get it from a news source that has some interest politically and financially from other parties. So
that's a good thing. That's directly going to the source. So it's not that news and media is going away. It's just now that people are instantly verified and held accountable for what they say. It sounds like you might just have direct journalists that are posting to the public, but you're still going to probably have organizations that provide some sort of structure or framework to.
I'm sure
cameras are better. A journalist still probably needs some sort of resources, at least now.
I'm sure he'll have some sort of system that maybe there's a system where you can vouch for the story. Like, like Reddit has upvotes or something. So there'll be ways where multiple validated sources can like say, yeah, this is a legit story. This is legit. Something like that.
Do you think a way to verify is going to be facial recognition? Like in opening an iPhone, isn't that a way where you can make sure?
Fingerprint recognition, facial recognition. I mean, he has access to all that, plus more.
Why hasn't a social media company, let's say, so Apple owns, let's say, the hardware that facilitates the recognition.
I'll tell you the truth.
How are they not plugging into that?
As an app developer, I'll tell you exactly why.
Yeah.
We want users. We want people to make 10 accounts because we want to show the numbers are huge.
Oh, shit. Good point.
But that's why he says it'll only work if it's a private company. If it's a public company, shareholders would get pissed that he's going to lose 3/4 of the users.
I see.
So it'll only work when it's a private company because he doesn't have to answer to anybody to say, hey, we're erasing 3/4 of all the users on this system.
So what do you think the new business model is going to be? Stepping away from advertising and maybe subscription-based? He's already got enough money, which is good because then he could focus on the ethics and morality of the platform. This is the thing. Not the bottom line.
He owns 100% of it. He doesn't have to answer to anybody. He doesn't need to make money from it. The fact that it's a platform where he can get out what he needs to get out is going to be enough money to sustain it. And if he inserts some sort of financial aspect where there is like a percentage of transaction fee, that'll sustain it. He doesn't have to make this big. He doesn't have to please anybody with it. That's the crazy thing about it.
So he can use it, though, to help build the bottom line of his other organizations. And, that's just not saying that's his sole purpose, but that's one purpose. And let's focus on the free speech for a little bit. So Twitter is notorious for, not just Twitter, other social media platforms, for regulating and banning accounts and kind of policing the public square per se. And since it's such a new piece of technology and we really haven't been faced with these challenges and questions since 2010, 2011, people will make the argument like, oh, Twitter needs to be an open public square where you are basically a human being in the real world speaking to the publics, and that's how discourse should be had. But in tying it back to fake accounts being created, let's say if you're able to create messaging under fake bot accounts or what have you, then it technically isn't a public square at that point, because you're almost performing a function of a human and communicating verbiage, but it's not. It's from a fake place where you in the flesh aren't being held accountable. So to bring it back into what you said, if there's a way to verify that this is a human on their Twitter account actually performing this speech, as you said earlier, it's going to, I think, clean up a little bit of the nasty speech, and people are going to care about how people are taking them in. And that's freaking amazing, because that's not going to just improve free speech, in my opinion, but it's going to make speech better over time.
Oh yeah, because cancel culture. People don't want to get canceled. So there's a lot of stuff that people say under the umbrella or under the shadows of their fake account. Like, nobody really knows who I am. I could say whatever I want type thing. If you have to use facial recognition and it's validated that, hey, this is you on there and you're saying that, then people already know like where that's coming from and who that is. People will think twice before they do something like that.
So how does he make sure it doesn't turn into like the Communist Party of China and their social system where they're rating their citizens now, right? Based on like a social credit score. Have you heard of anything like that?
I've heard a little bit on it. I haven't heard a lot on it, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So you could say on one side, if someone's 100% validated, let's say to the point where to the court of law.
Well, so this is the thing. I think it's only going to work if he can 100% validate. And that, I think, is going to be the core thing that he's going to be working on. So there isn't going to be, he may allow some accounts to like just exist, but you don't have to listen to them. They'll probably filter out, like you may have to click a button to see all the unvalidated accounts, but the validated accounts are what like shows front and center.
Interesting.
And those validated accounts, it's all dependent on how good he could do the validation. And I know he's going to go real hard on that for sure.
Yeah. So in the world of acquisitions, this would be inorganic through acquiring Twitter. Why do you think he took that path, just in taking on the infrastructure and the existing user database? Why did he not just go straight from scratch and bottom up building this recognition software?
Look how long it took to build it.
Yeah.
Yeah, look how long he can build something and he's popular enough, well, he'll get millions of people on there. But to get it to parallel to where Twitter is, you're talking 10, 15 years. He wants this to happen within the next few years. Like, it's going to literally change the world. It's
so crazy how all these things go on behind the scenes. It's just the nature of business and companies since the beginning of time. You're putting together these plans, and he's had some sort of series of thoughts in his head leading to the purchase, and we now are predicting what's going to come out of him in the next couple years, like available to the public. It just trips me out. But Twitter amongst one, of course, we know that he has Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company, and we'll get into those. But in purchasing a social media platform, and just since 2000, when do you think MySpace and Facebook really took off? Like mid 2000s, 2007, 8?
Yeah, probably. It was in the 2000s. Yeah.
It's just crazy how all these companies are making
maybe. Yeah.
They're making the innovations. He comes in 2022 amongst all of his other businesses, acquires this company, and is now one of the biggest players in the game. And he isn't just a typical CEO or leader. Like, we categorize him as this fringe, artistic, good-willed person, right?
So,
he's not someone that most people question. We trust him.
Right.
And
right.
Why do you think that is? Like,
because it comes from a different place as business. Because again, he made enough money with PayPal that he I work with enough entrepreneurs to know that once you hit a certain amount, money is not the motivator anymore. You know, you get all your bills paid, you have fun, and he had fun. He had a McLaren, and you know, he lived the life, and you know, after a while, it becomes kind of like, you know, this what's next, right? And then they all start selling their stuff and living like. Remember Tony Hsieh from Zappos was living at a I don't know, a garage or something, and then before he passed away, and you know, there's a lot of other entrepreneurs that just sell everything.
And then you have Bezos with the super yacht.
Yeah, Bezos. But so I mean, the intention from Elon, he makes it clear. He always just in his mind, the criteria for business is what can he do to help the outcome of humanity the most.
Literally a problem solver. He said
100%
his brain just is like a computer solving problems, and not just the biggest problems you can kind of pose. He is focused on that. And one of his premises that he always speaks to is he wants to build a future that is worth getting excited about.
Exactly.
And that's like a beautiful thing. When he says that, I believe him. And if money isn't the sole motivator and he's taking away time from his family and he isn't just kicking his feet up on the beach, I mean, his time is super valuable, then yeah, someone can make the argument, oh, he's just egotistical, right? He's just obsessed with building and building and building. When you hear him in long form and not stepping out of the realm of talking about business, but just communicating with a friend like Joe Rogan, they step outside of the scope of business. He's just a kind of a friendly, likable problem solver. Yeah. He just seems like his brain is programmed to do those types of things.
At some point in his life, I mean, he's always, I think from childhood, always been like a genius, a problem solver. Everyone went to him to solve problems. At some point in his life, he realized that nobody else is trying to solve these problems. So I guess it has to be him. And then he just put the weight of that in his shoulders and just ran with it. And
you guys are very similar in that sense. I remember hearing his interview. I forget the age when he said, like, wait, I realized that not everyone is like me. I'm actually very different.
For sure.
Like, I'm the outlier. Why aren't all these other people thinking about these things and trying to solve them? And in reading your book, shout out your book, The 4 Keys, you talk about that too early on, just recognizing that you had a brain for problem solving and that it made you an outlier at first, but you were able to kind of fit in and turn it into a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the story, it's funny because when I read like biographies and hear stuff about Elon, like there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, I'm not the richest man in the world, and he has another characteristic that I lack for sure, which is a lot more of the action-based stuff, which is everybody needs to work on, but he just has that gene or whatever, that switch. But
what do you mean the action-based stuff?
So a lot of people will be like a problem solver, but then they'll find the solution, but implementing it into real life is the difficult part, and then scaling it. Scaling it is the biggest part. You know, you can always find a solution and then, okay, we fixed that. But now find a solution. Okay, we fixed that. And now let the world know that we fixed it. That's his one step beyond. He's just thinking way bigger than I ever was. But yeah, I mean, ever since I was a kid, I used to take apart all my toys and stuff just to see how they worked. And it was just like, people used to get pissed at me. It's like, dude, you just got that for your birthday. Why did you just break it? I mean, it's just like nonstop. Like I need to see why, like how things work, why, why did this work? Yeah. Just every time I saw problems, it just like, oh, this is the solution. And it's like, you start seeing problems, everyone like, oh, I could do this. And it just becomes like overwhelming with like solutions to problems.
Isn't it strange then to see some folks that are very habit oriented, just kind of plugged into a bigger system and they don't really see problems. They're just, the majority of humans are like that, right?
Majority of people. And that's why I realized soon that, I just thought it was like weird and kind of different. Like I would always never be like present, like in school, because I'm always like thinking of like solutions to something. And it's funny because like the first thing that Elon did was he created a video game that he sold, and it was a space fighter video game. That was the first thing I ever did, was create a space fighter video game. Like literally when I was a kid, it was like you kind of get drawn to the same kind of stuff. Like he was into programming because there's a lot of problem solving in programming. But as I went through life and people started coming to me to solve problems, especially in the coding side. I would get hired by companies that would hire teams of people that couldn't find problems. Say, hey, I'll give you a try. If you can fix it, I'll give you. And like, I think I'm 100% on being able to fix everybody's issues. So at some point in time, I realized like, okay, well, I guess maybe this is a gift. Like I'm good at problem solving because it's not just coding, just anything. I don't know if I get just like a hyper focus where I could just like dig into it and find a solution to something. And just so once I realized that it's a gift, then the similarity with Elon kind of came to play where I really saw it because when he said the words like, oh, like, what can I do that's going to benefit humanity the most, right? That's kind of what I did. It was like, and this is like years ago, like 15 years ago, like we before I even heard of Elon, is like, okay, saying that this is not craziness, saying this is a gift, how can I use it to impact the world the most? And that's how the book, The Four Keys, kind of came about.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I mean, focusing on your world in tech and coding and whatnot, you're able to take the theory of problem solving and the scientific method, and then you just have a new tool, like means of kind of communicating it through computers.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that. I would say just my problem solving ability translated into tech. It's very easy to translate that ability into tech, but that it would apply for like anything. Like I would always be the relationship guy too. Like, how do you fix my relationship with somebody? It was the same, even like for like through high school and stuff like that. So it's like now. So, I mean, essentially the four keys, basically I was working in VC for a little while because for a long time, everybody told me like money and power was kind of like everything you're going after. So I was like, oh, what makes the most money? Oh, venture capital. So I'm going to go into venture capital. So I kind of started in finance, worked my way up into venture capital, got there, started working with guys that were like buying islands and crazy net worths. They were all like unhappy. Like all of them were just like either they're like jumping out of planes and racing on tracks, or they're just depressed. So I was like, what is this? So that kind of became, oh, how can I use my problem solving ability? Let me try to solve why are people not happy. So that's how it all came about. It's a
loaded question.
It's a loaded question, and it became and the answer was a loaded answer. I'll tell you that. Yeah, but it's pretty cool. I mean, it's basically the book, The Four Keys, is a direct blueprint on how to feel fulfilled and how to feel happy. There's no guessing game. You can actually figure yourself out by using the tools. And I mean, I've been doing it with individuals for coaching, and it's been working wonders. People come in fighting depression. I don't know what to do with my life. Within a few days, they're better. They have a focus. They have like a destination. So I'm hoping it'll help people. But going back to Elon, that same question is what I asked. How can I use my skills to help the world the best, right? And that's what he said, and that's what he's doing.
It's so interesting, the human brain. I've been thinking about this lately, how you just, in helping a couple people, if your brain is just a supercomputer and it's coded improperly with poor thoughts, like poor pathways of thinking, sometimes all you need is this new piece of code that another person thought of, and it could reprogram your outlook on life.
Well, I mean, that's the first thing you ask yourself is like, let me ask you this. Do you think you can control what you like?
Control what I like? I would say some items you're going to be programmed to like just based off of your genes as a human, and then some you can kind of learn over time. Like, let's say if you're not exposed to something, right, so you don't even know that it exists, you don't know if you like it, you probably can grow to like it. But let's say you're like cravings for sugar or fatty foods, something that statistically most humans like, oh, you're programmed to like these things because they're nutrient dense. Yeah,
I mean, but it goes even beyond those type of things. It goes to like, your hobbies, or, what you get the most satisfaction from. A lot of it actually does stem from your DNA. Because I mean, if anybody could just choose what they like, then there'll be a lot more people that are happy with their job, happy with their marriage. You're like, oh, I can't stand this person. Wait, I'm gonna learn to like it. And it's like hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what this book kind of does. It kind of decodes, which part of what your desires are pre-programmed, and which part of it is something else.
So that just sparked an idea. Have you seen The Giver? The movie, or read the book, The Giver?
No.
But if things are programmed in people's DNA, it's one of those movies where you're born and like they observe you in adolescence and then you're placed into a job or a program that you seem fit for or deemed
Right.
fit for. Or do you think that's a potential future? Is if what makes you happy, let's say 85% of it is predetermined in your DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe not forced, but actionable advice.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
you would be a happier farmer or programmer. Is that, do you have a percentage of how much could be?
so it's a little bit complicated because that a lot of your desires are programmed from your DNA from when you're born, from your parents or your ancestors. But some of them are also because of survival. It's ingrained because of extreme events. So when things have
Epigenetics.
yeah, so essentially anything that you like and the way you feel is all just a chemical response. It's all like dopamine and just going through your body like what programs your brain to release dopamine when something happens, right? So for example, if you like hurt yourself doing something like like a major accident, a lot of times like when you see that same scenario, you wince because you felt that. So that's something that kind of like reprograms you a little bit. So stuff like that also is into account for what you like.
Even though we can't speak from experience on this, but like what about someone cutting, like pain oriented habits that turn into.
This is a controversial thing, is that in essence, like when you hear people about electroshock therapy, electroshock therapy technically actually works. It's just it got a bad stigma for some reason. Any organization that does it is frowned upon. I don't recommend people to just shock themselves, but if you actually like visualize something that you're trying to dislike, like like smoking or something, and you get a physical act of pain anytime you hold a cigarette or you do it actually will reprogram your mind to not desire those things. So pain is kind of a catalyst for change. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of real world AI, because if your brain then is just this organic computer that can be programmed, Elon Musk has been trying to solve the real world artificial intelligence challenge. And with Tesla and the self-driving car, he realized that the biggest problem that needs to be solved is that real world AI. And now he's transitioning to, or he's applying it rather, to the robot Optimus. Have you heard of Optimus?
I have.
We'll have to talk about that. But that's so crazy that just by pursuing the electric vehicle, the self-driving car, it's led to a series of events now to where he's predicting Optimus is going to be bigger than the car itself. And I wanted to ask you a couple questions about one of the challenges he identified is building vector space, like images and having all the cameras work together.
Yeah.
From a coding standpoint, because you know that so well, like how big is that feat to literally program in vector space all the potential scenarios and predicting in a car, predicting the activities of other cars, humans, birds, trees, all of those different items?
It's super difficult. So this is the one thing.
So
that,
real quick,
yeah.
just an addition onto that question. So it's difficult. Is it difficult in the technical writing of the code or scale, like having enough people and algorithms
so I'll tell you what it is. And so this is the one thing, because like pretty much everything with Elon, like, oh man, that's so smart. Oh man, this is great. This is the one thing I'm not 100% sure on his choice. So he decided to use optics, so cameras, for all the self-driving, and there's a lot of people that kind of like wonder why he doesn't use sensors. So the thing is, if you look back, Google is all about sensors. Tesla is all about cameras. They're always fighting like this and saying like, oh, sensors are better. Oh, cameras are better. Oh, sensors are better. I mean, realistically, both is the best. So I don't know why he doesn't implement sensors into it, because it would just give that much more data. I'm hoping there's a reason on it besides the fact that he doesn't want to use Google's tech and doesn't want to like he's competing with Google to try to prove them wrong, because he's friends with he's friends with them, and they're always back and forth about it. because Google is trying to make this self-driving car too, but they're using 100% sensors, and he's using 100% cameras. And there's almost like a competition on who could do it better.
But ideally, it would be both.
Ideally, it's both because there's a lot of sensors, like sonar and things like that. They can detect depth. Visually, like it's kind of a 2D image that they're trying to figure out and use AI to figure out what's depth. But there's always been issues, like even Elon like admits it, that if somebody walks by with a stop sign on their shirt and goes like this, the car will stop because it detects a stop sign. So if you had a sensor, you can kind of tell if that's like a person or if that's like, there's other things you could find, like the depth of where it's at and if it's moving and things like that. So creating a vector space with only image, that's technically a 2D visualization. Without sensors, the image is just a 2D visualization. And then by using AI and multiple cameras, you could kind of figure out depth. So it's using multiple cameras to figure out depth, where everything's at, and mapping everything that way.
Why not use the sensors to communicate to the cameras?
That's what I'm saying. If you had both, it'd be amazing.
Because couldn't you then use the sensors to get data on depth, and then you can apply that to like the camera code?
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't. You can merge the two.
I wonder if he's using both. I could have swore I've heard him say that he was trying to implement both.
I don't know. As far as I know, right now it's mostly image based. It's location based too, because the GPS and all that stuff. But realistically, the biggest asset from the entire self-driving is the database. Every single car is recording every stop, every stop sign it finds, every signal it finds. So I think what he's banking on is eventually the AI will be so smart because it already experienced it before that you don't need sensors.
I see.
But there are these scenarios where you hear about these self-driving cars that crash. Like they'll just slam into the car in front of them. And usually they find that some sort of reflective paint that kind of reflected off the sun, and it didn't, it did something like that. See, with a sensor, you would never run into something in front of you because the sensor would detect the object.
I see.
But you can trick the visuals with messed up reflections and light and things like that.
So being a coder and knowing that there are problems, there are hacks, there are things that go wrong with this technology, how could you possibly build something then where you have hundreds of thousands of humans, and the risk and liability there is, of course, the system's getting smarter over time, but just any risk there, he's spoke to, as soon as it is lesser of an evil of the average human ability to make errors and auto accidents and whatnot, then as soon as you could pass that threshold, it's still an overall positive in preserving life. Yeah. But how do you have a team that could write code that's not going to go wrong like that?
No, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's not going to work. I think it's just more difficult. You have to do a lot more AI. You have to do a lot more calculations. You have to have multiple camera angles to get the same amount of data that you can with probably a single camera and a sensor.
Yeah.
But it can be done. It's just a lot more work. It'll probably take more time as far as how much data you have to collect to get the same result. But I think what he's trying to do, if it's not just a competition thing, is he's trying to mimic a human. Humans don't have sensors. Humans have eyes, and it's basically using the same input method as a human would. So he's trying to replicate a human. So the problem with that is that humans crash. So if you replicate a human, we're going to crash once in a while, right? If you add ability to the human, add sensors, then you can mitigate crashes. But I think he's trying to replicate a human that doesn't make as many mistakes. But they're limited by what a human has,
You're right.
Can input, yeah.
He has talked about the eyeball, why
Yeah.
image rather than sensor is so important, because that's what the human eye does.
Mm-hmm.
But even though that's how we evolved, that might not be what's best for a inorganic robot car. As he likes to call it, he's like, all my cars are basically just robots on four wheels.
If you want to take it to a whole deep level of potentials, the only reason I would think you do that, because all of his stuff, they merge together, right? So Solar City obviously is powering, you could power Tesla's vehicles. It's merged together. He wants to use some of SpaceX stuff to make some of the cars faster with Tesla, right? they cross, cross use their resources and their data and things like that. It's all linked together, right? So if you think about that, if you have Neuralink, and Neuralink has the AI capability of the self-driving car, then essentially you can use the optical input of someone's eyes and then calculate what to do, basically using the same system that he's building right now. Right? So it'd be like a seamless process. Like the input of your optics would go into the Neuralink, and then you would be able to use the same AI that Tesla has in your own head.
Jesus.
Like, if you wanna say that it's compatible with a human, that may be a reason. Because otherwise, like if you have sensors and stuff, then no, it's not. You know what I mean?
On Neuralink, real quick,
I don't know. Yeah.
He said that the first 10 years or so are going to be just solving like spinal issues and brain issues and stuff like that. But eventually it is going to be an interface of the biggest challenge with this phone in your pocket. I mean, we're all cyborgs basically is what he describes, is the fact that we're using our thumbs to generate the inputs. And that's just so slow. If you can kind of, I was thinking of it earlier while driving. I was listening to one of his interviews. I wanted to be like, pause, record that, put into this note folder. Instead of like driving and being like, oh, that was a good note, I want to write it in the note folder. If you could just think it, like, I'll place that note into this folder. Or like, oh, schedule this meeting for tomorrow. Whatever it may be, there's going to be so many different actions. But just removing the two thumbs and inputting and typing at a slow rate, that's the problem he's trying to solve, is that communication, that input barrier. But God, it freaks a lot of people out.
It does. And that whole, you're already a cyborg, you're just phone in your pocket. I mean, that's just kind of to lighten the idea of it. You're like, you're already halfway there. This is what's a little implant. We're just we're surgically inserting it instead of you holding it in your hand. But it's a lot bigger than that, again, with all his stuff. I mean, if you want to figure him out, all you have to think about, why is he doing it? And it's always for the best scenario for future of humanity, right? He's literally afraid of AI, which is contradictory because he's building it, right? Is he like building Skynet, or is he trying to defend us against Skynet, right? We don't know. But he thinks that the only chance that we have to protect ourselves against AI is to use something like Neuralink, so we can speed up our thoughts to get ahead of it, or at least match their abilities, right?
To mirror it.
That's the end goal. Is that? I mean, I've heard him talk about some of the robots, like the Boston Dynamic robots and some of the robots, and he says that literally, it is possible to create a robot that runs faster than your eye can see right now.
What?
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, he says that the technology is there, that you could build a robot that is faster than the eye can see.
It's like a superhero.
It's a superhero. So how do you protect, if you have a legion of superhero army, how do you fight against that? You can't even see them coming.
See, this is what I'm scared of, because I'm not too afraid of a leader like Elon Musk, who recognizes the AI and the potential for negative outcomes. That kind of keeps a good checks and balances, hopefully in his business model along the way. But once that technology becomes commonplace and you have a whole array of people now which have access to it, then it's a matter of personality. And if humans are flawed, then his technology in the hands of someone more evil, or with someone that wants to take over the world or do whatever, that's when it becomes scary, because you're like, even though this one individual is good, they're opening up Pandora's box. Right. And inevitably, is that going to lead to a future of, you have 100,000 different use cases. All it takes is one bad use case, like with the atomic bomb, for example.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these scientists, you're going through the actions and the methods of just the physics and the science and the process, but you can't possibly predict the future of opening that Pandora's box.
Exactly.
And he even says he wants that government regulation. He wants some sort of agency to put some.
Nobody will do it.
Imagine a set of politicians, though, and they are not going to know how off the bat to regulate or communicate about this stuff, you're going to have to bring in people that are geniuses in the field who aren't really going to be incentivized to go into the government agency besides some sort of virtuous reason that they see something that they need to protect or help along the way. It's just scary because it's Pandora's box is being opened.
I mean, it's the same situation as you hear all these like labs that like study viruses, right? They'll create these superhuman viruses, but it's not to use as a weapon. It's actually they're trying to potentially see what could happen in nature and then find an antidote for it. But in the process, they're creating them, right? So if they get loose, who knows what could happen. It's the same thing. It's like, I'm sure he weighed the pros and the cons, and I think he figures that if he doesn't do it, somebody else is going to do it at some point in time. So regardless, it's going to happen. Might as well be prepared for it, right? But who knows, as he creates it, gets in the wrong hands, and it becomes a thing. Because the scary thing is with Optimus, right? So he even said that, don't worry, guys, we're limiting it so it only could run 5 miles an hour. So if it ever turns on you, you could just outrun it. Don't worry about it, right? That's like literally.
Or yeah, he said there's some sort of mechanical switch on it, a piece of hardware that cannot be programmed from like any sort of Wi-Fi connection or any sort of software. It's like you can just unplug it or hit the switch or say stop, and it's automatically going to stop. But like I said, it just takes a couple evil people to figure it out. And
I've seen enough 1,000 horsepower Honda Civics to know that they could probably soup up that robot to run like light speed,
That's so wild. He said that in the next 15 years, they're going to start popping up in households all over. That you're going to be able to buy one for 20, 30 grand. It'll be able to take care of grandma, cook your dinner, maybe even a free babysitter if you trust your robot with your kids. I mean, this is shit we're going to have to face in our lifetime.
It's pretty intense. I mean, do you ever watch Star Trek? Have you ever watched?
No, I never really did.
Like, I don't watch it too much, but I know, like, the premise behind, like, why, like, the future is so, like, amazing, for humans was because once they were able to create these replicators where you can just, like, make whatever you want out of it, then the need to steal and the need for, like, being starving, it went away. And I'm thinking he has that kind of idea.
He calls it the future of abundance.
The future of abundance. Because, I mean, right now we're already seeing issues with manufacturing. I mean, I think that kind of was the hitting the nail on the head. Like that was the final straw. When she saw all these manufacturing issues from China and like, okay, if we go to war with some of these countries and they're providing us goods, what do? We don't manufacture here. And if we do, it costs so much and prices are going to skyrocket, right? Well, if you have 10,000 of these Optimus things that are just working 24 hours a day making stuff, your cost of goods like shrinks to like nearly barely anything.
Yeah, he was talking about the labor shortage in combination with the low birth rate.
Yeah.
He currently, I don't know the exact numbers. This is just something he said, but at our current birth rate in the Western world, we're not going to be able to sustain our current lifestyle. And we will be reliant on a foreign power, let's say like China, who can just pull the rug from under us. So in problem solving, it goes back to problem solving.
Yep.
He's like, let's just create a robot. It's going to get rid of some of the labor shortage jobs that humans don't want to do. It's going to be good for bottom line. It's going to be good for a lot of businesses because they're going to be able to produce goods, like you said, 24/7. They're going to become cheaper. They're going to become more readily available. And this future of abundance, I actually wrote a note earlier. So when he says building a future that is worth getting excited for, he speaks to a future of abundance, right? Mm-hmm. This technologically advanced, abundant future. Some people, they think just a good crop yield, just taking it back to the good old farming, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. That's a future of abundance, is just living off of the land, getting rid of all the technology. And we still have so many of those humans in our societies that do not like where technology is going. I don't think that is the future and that ideology is going to win out. But it's just crazy if you scale up and take a sample size of time in humanity. Like we used to be like the future of abundance is getting a good sustainable crop yield to feed our people. If you take that same premise and you fast forward now to 2050, and all of these elements have been added to the equation of robots creating a future of abundance. Oh, you have a food shortage, or you're worried about quality control with certain foods, or what have you. What if they're, instead of just popped into my head, what if instead of spraying chemicals on a crop field, you have a little robot that runs around and kills all the bugs?
Yeah.
So like you can have organic product that you don't want to worry about bugs eating it or whatever. You're like, no, just that's a benefit.
Or for
right?
all the bug activists out there, they can just like nicely, gently pick them up and put them in a jar. I mean,
right? They don't crush them.
Yeah.
So there's just this infinite amount of scenarios of positive outcomes, and then all it takes is a couple negatives, though. That's the scared part.
Yeah.
And that's part of our human programming too, is to recognize and weigh, like, a bigger importance is placed on negative than positive, which is why we focus so much on negative. But in real world AI with robots, you gotta heavily weigh those potential negatives.
Yeah, in my book, it's a big part of it is why so many people are unhappy. A lot of it is due to the programming in your mind is kind of geared for society before technology, like before like today's current technology. Like, some people, they like building, they like to, like being like in construction or farming. A lot of these jobs are like obsolete. Like a lot of the things, like, how many blacksmiths do you know? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. Right? It's like, so a lot of our pre-programming is for a skill that's obsolete. So essentially, if we roll back the years, it's easier to find your purpose in life. A lot of times, you found families kind of like, it was like a long line of blacksmiths, right? It wasn't like, it's like, oh, this guy's a blacksmith, my son does this. No, they're all blacksmiths. And it's not because they're forced into it. A lot of times it's because they get the same amount of satisfaction, just like their parents did. So they continue to do, the same things. But as things kind of get obsolete, and as we get more access to stuff and more stimuli from things, and now video games give us like more dopamine than we should be getting in the real world, we get kind of confused. So
do you think that speaks to a lack of structure in whether it's a familial unit passing down the crown, or blacksmith, or a religion, or just too much opportunity, almost too much stimuli drives a lot of people to become crazy and depressed because if you don't have that guidance, if you didn't have the parents to properly educate you about the world right now, the world that's coming, kind of predicting and trying to coach skill sets and schooling and whatnot, I feel like it speaks to a lack of structure sometimes can lead to chaos.
I think it's just society, to be honest. I mean, the thing is, your subconscious mind just always craves. All it wants to do is avoid pain and feel good. That's literally how much, your subconscious part, what it wants to do. So that's why almost every kid I know, they either want to be a video game designer, a YouTuber, or a TikToker, because the things that give you the most dopamine rush, and they're programmed actually to give you the most dopamine rush, is what they end up saying, like, oh, I wish I could do that, like, as my job, right? That's just what happens, Or like before, when it was in like my era, it was more like movies. Like when you go to the movies, you get all this rush in the big, oh, I want to be in the movies, or I want to make movies and stuff like that,
So if that's where the future's heading, to tie back into Elon Musk and its problem solving with robots, if the youth is there 100% is going to be a shortage of technicians and people.
That's what they're hoping, but
you don't think so?
I think the interest is there, but it's an interest solely based on like a dopamine rush. So the problem with that is, I've seen it just being in the industry, is that people are like, oh, I want to make video games. And then they go try it, like, dude, I hate this. Coding is boring. Like, I have to do like 50 pages of this just to make his arm do this. This is whack. I don't want to do this. You know what I mean? They just know the result. They don't know like the process that goes into it. So that's the issue. But so if you were to roll back the clock in the olden days, people could figure out their purpose easier, and people are just generally more happy. Not saying that their livelihoods were better or anything like that, but just like they didn't crave that, oh, what should I be doing with my life, like that so many people are doing right now.
So do you think ever since the Industrial Revolution, then we're just going through growing pains
Yes.
as humans? Like
I,
we're literally stuck in this tornado of all of these new innovations coming in such a short timeline relative, and then especially post internet era, it's just insane.
yeah.
Like a lot of our monkey brains, for lack of a better term, are operating in a world where the baseline for cyborgs and robots are already being laid. Like that's the future,
Yeah.
and we're just these meat vehicles operating.
Well, I mean, going back on that, the problem is we're more tribal by nature. Just our DNA and everything is more focused to be like living in tribes. Social media gives you access to everyone. We're not used to that. We're not supposed to have that right now. And then so it just gives us misinformation all over. We don't know what to do with it. It's just too much. But going back to what you're saying about the Industrial Revolution, I think it's sad to say because I'm a tech guy. I'm in tech, but I think tech is the biggest problem in the world, to be honest. It's I think the definition of technology and how technology was supposed to be used got skewed somewhere down the line. Technology should give you the opportunity to grow and thrive and be able to give you more opportunity. Like it can improve things, give make things better, give open doors that weren't there before. That's what technology should do. Create something like amazing, something that's like brand new, right? But when it got involved with money and capitalism, it became also about replacing people. So almost 90% of technology that's developed is to replace people, like AI and all this stuff. So you can, oh, you don't need a social media manager because this AI can do the social media manager, stuff like that. I'm sure you've seen those things like that. And then, but that's any technology. Like look at Elon's factory for Tesla. They're all like majority of his robots, right? That replaced people. Once technology became also replacing people instead of creating new things is when things went awry, because now there's less and less opportunity for people that actually have a job. They're making industries obsolete. They're making jobs obsolete. People who have had generations and generations of one type of skill is irrelevant now. I mean, pretty soon, look at truck drivers, how many truck drivers there are out there. Once self-driving trucks are allowed, and they probably will be allowed. If they're not allowed on the freeway, he'll build tunnels, and then they'll go through the tunnels, and then they don't have to follow the rules of the road, and they'll be fine.
Do you think the premise of building things through technology, just infinite number of things, like when you were speaking, I was getting a vision of like artistic nature, like just creating things to create things, to make life better, to make food better, to make just your overall happiness go up.
Yeah.
I feel like that premise though is almost impossible because there has to be an end to that. Like even if you were to speak to just the sheer amount of space on Earth, even though we like currently have so much left to still build and infrastructure and whatnot, it's almost tied in with humans' urge to not just create, but to look like you're going up, like being stagnant, just not growing.
Yeah.
Whether it's money or not, just the idea of not growing is something that is like a human kryptonite to most.
Mm-hmm.
Like people that have power, people that have money, it's the general nature of capitalism sometimes, and like Wall Street. Like enough is never enough.
And that's the human nature. Basically, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. I'm sure you've heard that. And it's built in our DNA, because you think of it like just the purpose of life, not saying anything like spiritual or anything like that, but the purpose of life is to thrive and continue to thrive and find the best conditions to thrive. That's all living things.
Yeah.
All living things are trying to find a better situation. They're all searching for something where the ability to thrive increases. That's just pre-programmed in us, and it comes out, especially when you have a lot of money. So a lot of ways that some of these billionaires are seeing it is, hey, if we're not exploring the solar system, we're moving backwards because we're not growing. You know what I mean? That's their vision.
So that's a capitalistic framework. What about, let's say, a Buddhist monk? There's other folks that have that idea of abundance and kind of I don't know though. Are they happily neutral? Isn't that the notion of
That's
that ideology?
so that's the kind of the way people look at it is happiness is either you're following that instinct of wanting to improve over time, always improve, always improve, always improve. And there's another ideology which is accept what you got, accept what you got. So Buddhist monks are like that's what they're known for. Like finding nirvana is being at peace with what you have now. And literally you're so at peace that you can meditate until you die. Like you can meditate for 50 years and you've heard some of these monks because they're so at peace with now. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is, I mean, in my perspective, I mean, it's a good thing. I think, people that have so much stress because they have so much weight on their shoulders of having to do this and that, it's a good way to kind of like try to calm that, but it seems like it's a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. All these monks, they have to give up everything. They have to go to monasteries and just to be able to kind of get themselves to accept the now and accept everything is. And
it's almost like a definition of discipline.
It's discipline,
like an extreme discipline.
And discipline literally is like kind of forcing yourself to like do something, right? When it's not natural, So that's that's kind of what people are weighing. The unnatural way is that the actual natural way of how life is that we're always wanting more, even if it's to our detriment. That's the problem, because it's not necessarily for our best intentions. That's just how we're built.
And that's when we're supposed to learn from history and not repeat mistakes. But I think we should be in that dynamic tension of neutrality and gratitude for what you have. And then when advancing forward, trying to filter it through a non-selfish, I think we're all a little selfish to some degree, but some sort of, however you define altruism, your decision-making going forward to better the world should be filtered through an altruistic nature. To bring it back to Elon Musk, he claims that's why he's doing everything. It's to bring humanity to a more secure, happy future. And one of his companies, SpaceX, he is literally, his main goal is just to prepare humanity and consciousness. It's weird when you hear him talk about it, is he wants us to be able to escape planet Earth in case of an asteroid or some sort of mega disaster. Not just to save humanity, but to save consciousness. Because I don't think he's clear that consciousness exists totally outside of our brains. And if we all die, then consciousness dies.
I don't know if he's completely convinced that we're not living in a simulation either.
That's true.
But no, but going back to that, every one of his companies has like a reason, sustainable energy, fighting AI, basically, well, now thinking about moving to Mars, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done on Mars before we can live there.
You got to terraform it. He said something like 1,000 ships.
Even before you terraform it,
changing the atmosphere.
If you had maybe 1,000 robots that could build for you.
Exactly. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They don't need oxygen.
They don't need oxygen. They can be, without us doing anything, he could just send like 1,000 Optimus over there. And then by the time we get there, oh, shoot, there's like a city here. Oh, there's running water. Like, what's going on?
God, so that fear, how much is based in reality of watching the movie I, Robot, and this hardware with human emotion software, rather, right? So you have the hardware of the robot programmed with the software of humans going array, turning evil, becoming smarter than us. How much of that do you think is based in reality? And then how much based on your knowledge of coding, hacking, the ability for things to go wrong? Do you think it's more likely that humans can always have control over these robots? No.
You think it's already a danger, to be honest?
Fuck, dude. Yeah. I was hoping you were going to tell me yes.
There's these computers. I don't know if you've seen these. There are these crazy looking contraptions that like they're not like regular computers, but they have the potential to be astronomically more powerful than regular computers. And like IBM has them, Google has them. I forgot what they're called. They're called what they're called. But they're the ones where they're used like organic matter to like flip like cells or something. It's crazy. And they look crazy. They're like made out of gold and these towers and all this
You don't
stuff.
know the name of it?
What are they called?
Or like maybe just describe it. Grant could Google it.
Yeah, it's just they're just like if you look at like supercomputer organic or something. I forgot what they're called. They're called
Supercomputer organic robots.
I forgot what they're called. But
Is
anyway,
one of the
yeah.
premises in the demise you're potentially describing, is it because if we just simply put human characteristics and traits in hardware, since humans are flawed and take advantage and are greedy, then over time the software is just going to turn into that, the AI? Or do you think it's different than that?
I mean, I don't want to be cliche and just quote a bunch of movies, but the way it always works in movies is that these AIs are always becoming problem solvers. So they're looking out for problems and trying to solve it. And essentially, at the end of the day, humans are the problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They might solve some of our issues by doing stuff that we don't want.
That's true. It's a deep truth, but then I'm asking myself with the movies, right? Because we always reference this sci-fi stuff. Sometimes the sci-fi becomes reality. And sometimes they get it wrong on a timeline. But I'm not convinced. That Hollywood directly translates into real-world application of the robots that are coming.
But the scary part is I just say it to be funny, right? You know, it's like we're basing it on like science fiction, like books but the thing is, the thing that motivated Elon are actually science fiction books. So he's actually making them into reality, which is pretty crazy. So essentially, we could probably look at some of these things and the billionaires loved them as kids and they're trying to shape it the way that some of these things happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a little scary.
Would you... Oh, let's say your kids, for example, are going to be able to have a robot watch their kids. As Grandpa Jason, are you going to be comfortable with that one day in like 20 years or whatever?
It's hard to say.
Because like you're on the cutting edge, let's say, of accepting technology, right? If I pose that question to 90 or to all of Americans, 95%, maybe even higher, are going to be absolutely terrified.
So the thing is that if he launches these Optimus machines and they seem very docile, and they seem like they have limitations, like they only could carry 45 pounds, they could do this, and they only could walk 5 miles an hour, whatever, and they feel like it's not a threat. I mean, I know people that watch their kids by using a camera in the house. You know, when they're not home, they have a camera that rotates, and it's like, and in every room they can see where he's at, and they check on their phone, and that's how they're watching their kids.
And a camera is a robot that operates like that.
Essentially,
basically,
I mean,
it
has your
robot.
input on it, but I mean, it's the same thing. If the robot was able to give you a screencast, some people might like that. Like, oh, I can just tell the robot to check on him in the room and see what he's doing. He just walks over there and I could look at him like, oh, okay, cool. You know what I mean? So I think we're already kind of there a little bit. So I don't think it's a huge stretch to make it.
Let me pose an example, because I could foresee some scenarios with these robots where countless numbers of kids are going to be saved from asphyxiation, like choking on something, right? It's going to know how to do CPR. That's going to be a baseline program. But there's also going to be a case where a robot trips, I don't know how heavy they are, is going to fall on a toddler and might kill one. So all these potentials, I forget the exact philosophical term where you're just trying to like weigh the good versus the bad, and that's how everything should operate.
It's the same thing. Like, I mean, kids have, you know, like parents have these swing sets for kids in the thing to put them to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There's dangers to that. They could fall off. They could strangle themselves. Put their arm. But at some point in time, they weighed the pros and cons. Because I'm sure when they first like developed that, and they put a swing, it's like, dude, who's gonna put their kid on that swing? It's so dangerous, right? But then everybody has it. You know, it might be the same thing. Oh, by the way, it's quantum computing. Just
I've seen quantum computing.
Yeah, so
they're like gold. They have a bunch of gold plates and whatnot.
Like that, yeah, quantum computing.
But this is what I'm talking about, though. So the pure hardware of this, and then the software that goes into it, I don't I'm not convinced that that directly equates to evil robots or things going
No,
bad.
it
So
doesn't.
if you have a humanoid robot, which Musk is creating and it's going to be in our households, if you were a hacker or trying to have something go wrong, I mean, how are you going to actually gain access into having those robots do something bad?
People are able to hack into anything. That's is a problem. That's the one issue, but
So it's like risk management. If
yeah,
you take the premise of hacking in software, you can hack an account to the detriment of someone's bank account. The negative outcome is lost dollars. The bank's got to get involved. Someone loses their home, whatever it may be. If you apply software going array and hacking to cars, to self-driving cars, to robots, to things in physical space that can go wrong, it enters like another realm, right, of negative. So even like robots that perform surgery, like surgeons, I bet there's some sort of percentage of error, right, where it's some sort of knife or whatever it may be is supposed to be on this specific part of the heart, or dental procedures or what have you. Hardware goes wrong sometimes. The software that's programmed into it. If you have a robot that's now interacting with your children in physical space, it's a risk. It's crazy.
yeah,
But I guess what I'm getting at though is that risk, the question has been posed in different ways with just accepting technology as humans, credit cards, the computer, cameras, and we're slowly but surely moving towards embracing a more accepting society with technology, right?
yeah.
So if we stay on that path, then it's inevitable that this software, this AI, is going to enter into our physical space. It's not going to just be programs in our phone, apps. It's going to be, how do we make this robot better? If we teach it CPR, how to cook this meal, how to open the fridge, how to walk your dog, the nature of that business is incentivized to program more functions that a human wants, right? So at that point, it's just crazy because that's inevitable. It's going to start
It's
at a base.
inevitable.
It's going to start at a baseline, and it's going to become smarter over time. But how does that directly equate to some world where the robots are taking over humans? Like,
Yeah.
I don't see it yet.
I know, but I mean, going back to it. It's the same thing as like self-driving cars. A lot of people are like, "Dude, there's no way I'm going to let the car drive itself. I'm going to crash." Eventually, more and more people are adopting it. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'll trust it and fall asleep in it like right away, but eventually, you probably will. A lot of people trust that. And when the robots first come out, guaranteed, there's tons of people that don't have kids that love technology. Like, dude, I'm gonna get this thing. It's gonna clean my whole house and do all this sort of stuff. And then people are gonna see like, hey, the thing is cooking for him. It's cleaning for him. He doesn't have to do anything. He needs dry cleaning and walks it down to the freaking store. You know what I mean? It's like, people are gonna be like, huh, maybe it's worth it.
This is what scares me too, though, with like Blade Runner type stuff. If you're a single individual, or if you're building a robot that is starting to de-incentivize you from having kids, because let's say one of the biggest baselines, sex sells, they're gonna make fuck robots. Like, dude, 100%, right?
Of course.
So if you're able to fill that human need, how many dudes, girl, like whomever, is just gonna have a robot now to fulfill their fantasies? They're like, oh, I don't need to procreate. I've got my robot. Cooks, cleans, everything. That's dangerous then, because is there going to be a tipping point where produced robots in the world are a higher number than organic humans?
And that's the thing. I mean, once it comes to the point, I mean, if what I think is right, and his goal is kind of like that whole Star Trek idea where everybody's kind of happy and less aggressive because everybody's kind of fulfilled, like nobody's starving, like literally, like if he would have send like 10,000 robots to the middle of Africa to do all the planning and growing and do all this labor for them, build them like stuff, you know what I mean? Like people would be better off, you know what I mean? It'll change lives. So I'm thinking he's hoping that in the future there'll be so many and the cost of goods will be so little that nobody will want to mess with it. Like even like people with ill intentions will be like, we'll see the positive, but I think that's a very positive way to look at people because in general there's always crazies.
Like a super army. Do you think that
Well, that's
a communist country would create a super army of robots?
I'm sure he's already looking at the military application for these as a just in case. You know what I mean? Like if Russia like wanted to invade America, well, we have like 100,000 Optimuses ready to go. You know what I mean? Just like he's like, oh, I have Starlink ready to go. Here you guys go. Oh, by the way, we got a whole army if you want to use them. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be surprised if like something like that happened.
My mind is just blown.
He's literally Tony Stark, like real life now.
It feels like the Matrix, dude.
Right?
Where is this all gonna go?
But like you said,
if you're weighing it against reducing suffering for how many people starving around the world, then what do you do? If you have a tool that could reduce this human suffering, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, and I think what he's trying to do. So so you could quote me on this. I guarantee you, at some point in time with SpaceX, he's gonna build a weapon system in outer space. Because the only thing that can ever, like, if say for example he creates, 1 million Optimuses, right? Just like Teslas, they're gonna be updated over the air through internet. There's so many possibilities of them getting hacked because of Wi-Fi and 5G signals or whatever. There's a lot of opportunity to get in there, unless he uses Starlink. If he uses Starlink, he has a direct connection and nobody has access to it, and it's like Fort Knox. The only way you could take down the system is you shoot down the satellites. So that's the same thing for like if Russia wanted Ukraine to stop using Starlink, if somebody wanted to shut down Twitter, if somebody wanted to shut down the robots, you would have to take down the satellites that are for Starlink. So I guarantee you they're already thinking of this, and then they're already thinking of a way to protect the satellites.
I see. Well, another thing just scared me, though.
Yeah.
And it counters a note that I wrote earlier from what Elon was saying, is that people living too long is a negative. It creates ossification of society.
Yeah.
If this infrastructure is built by Elon Musk over time, once he passes away and the throne, the realm's under someone else's control, that's kind of scary because if
and who holds the keys, right?
Who holds the keys? And if that's going to be over time passed down, is that a king with too much power or what, right? We know based on history that there are kings that are deemed good and the society is like flourishing and people are happy. They pass away and then an evil king gets the keys. I mean, so it's inevitable that he's going to leave the earth at one point.
Yeah.
Who's going to be at the freaking wheel of that ship?
My theory, and how he's trying to structure like Mars and how he's trying to and his fascination with crypto. My theory is that he would plan for it to be community run, where it's like a checks and balances system throughout the whole system. There's not a king, kind of like
direct,
kind of like Bitcoin. It's like it's the whole organic kind of like thing. You know what I mean? There's not like one head that makes decisions. It's its own living thing.
So he's running against the clock then to build that.
Or it's AI that does it.
That's scary.
Yeah.
He spoke to direct democracy instead of representative democracy. That's what he would want on Mars. And I mean, I'm on board with that. I think it's the best option. It just presupposes that the masses are educated enough and have good morals and ethics to make collective good group decisions, right?
Watch Neuralink is a whole like scam. Really all it is technology to download his brain somewhere. So the AI is basically his decision making abilities.
Musk, we're on your team. Musk, we're on your team.
Right? Can you imagine? So like he never dies. It's like literally he lives on forever. Like that's his consciousness is downloaded into the cloud.
Yeah, that is a Black Mirror episode. Have you seen it? Black Mirror on Netflix.
No, I've seen it, but I don't know which
It's
episode
it's the one where the elderly folks in, spoiler alert, I don't know which, it's old enough now, figure it out.
Yeah.
But they're an elderly home. Like before you pass over, you have the option to have your consciousness uploaded
Oh, okay.
to then like have eternal life in whatever scenario, whatever scene you want. So you can be, I want to be 28 again, and I want to be on Hawaii. I want this house, this car. I want these people with me. And then you just exist in this digital universe.
Yeah.
So your organic material passes over, but your consciousness is uploaded.
It's crazy.
It's definitely inevitable.
Yeah. I mean, you know, when I was writing my book, I was kind of studying the brain a lot. And what's funny is, like, if you look at the brain, I mean, so if you think of a computer, what defines a computer? Is it the computer itself and the hardware, or is it the hard drive? What defines what the computer is? Is it the operating system or the hard drive?
I think it's all together, because it would be like pulling out your heart or your brain. Like,
Well, not necessarily. Say you have a brand new computer with nothing on it.
mhm.
You use it for a year. If you take that hard drive out with all your stuff on it, but the computer still works with nothing, what's the computer? Is it your hard drive, or is it the computer?
Oh, got it. I would still say the computer is the hardware, the computer itself.
Yeah, so
The hard
essentially,
drive is memory.
exactly. So if you look at it in the perspective of the brain, your operating system on the decision making and stuff like that is pre-programmed in your DNA, and it runs, like, your subconscious does it all day long.
Mm-hmm.
It's influenced by what's on that hard drive, but your hard drive is basically just your memories. So kind of the essence of you is literally the programming of, like, what fires the chemicals and stuff like that.
Wow.
So what's interesting is, now that I think about it, if Elon were to put a Neuralink and just wear it for like 20 years, it would probably understand all of how he reacts to things. Even though it might not retain his memories, it would know, like, it would be him. Like, if you think him is that part of him, you know what I mean, and not his memories, right?
So that would be like an AI self-driving car. The system would get smart over time and learning
It'll relearn everything.
the electrical current of your brain. And then as long as you had that coded into software, you would then apply that code to some sort of software universe. So like you can maybe, it's like a video game with different levels, right?
Yeah.
So you enter into the game into a programmed universe, level 1, level 2, whatever it may be. So if each individual can be programmed, or their thoughts, their minds can be mapped, then you could place that person right into some sort of digital universe.
That's the metaverse.
Oh, dude. Oh my goodness. Well, the future is, I'm optimistic. I think we're, as long as we try to build our capacity for like empathy and ethics and morality, and not just growing our society as a technology-based society, as long as we, our insides, right? We want to remain good people, or try to make as many people on earth as good as possible, to have freedom and liberty to pursue the things they want, right? Because everything that we're talking about right now, all of this innovation is built off of certain baseline morals and ethics that give you the ability to navigate freely in the world, right? Otherwise, none of these things would even exist. If you were in a society where if you tried to create or innovate in any way, you would be murdered, then these things wouldn't happen. So I heard a couple people talking about Elon Musk being a part of America, and like being in a system that allowed all of this to happen, for as imperfect as it is. I think in navigating forward as humans, we need to agree on some sort of baseline morals and ethics that are very broad. The brackets are very broad in structure, and allow all of this free navigation within, and has checks and balances, but doesn't silence people, doesn't take away rights. Everyone is in the system just tries to do their best with a future knowing that there's going to be mishaps that we don't see, and we're going to have to course correct and problem solve and maybe fight fucking robots and stuff one day. But we have to, as humans, try to have each other's backs and all be on the same side, the human side, right? No matter your color, no matter your gender, no matter what it is, we're going through all of these growing pains right now. If we don't figure our shit out soon, we're going to be beat by technology.
Yeah.
And if we don't have each other's backs, there's going to be a few elites that are going to have access to the technology in the next 50 to 100 years. And they're going to use it to like take over the world. That's a possibility, right?
That's so the key problem is exactly what you said is morals and ethics. Because when you first build, some sort of AI system or whatever, there has to be some sort of rule set and some sort of boundary, right? So who gets to define what morals and ethics are? Everybody's idea of what's morally right and morally wrong may be different. So essentially, the king is whoever put that foundation in. It's like that the ethics based on Elon's ethics, is that right for everyone? Who knows, right? So the only alternative is to have the system problem solve on its own and say whatever is best for the human race. But the problem with that is, how many times are your parents saying like, I'm doing this for you, it's the best thing for you, and you don't agree with it, and you're like, screw that, that's not what I want. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna get that all day long. How does this computer know what I need more than I do?
That's a challenge, because the only measurement at that point is going to be the preservation of life.
Exactly.
Which, that's a good start. If we can all start there, the preservation of life.
There's a lot of things and a lot of people out there that are not doing their part to preserve life. Then what do you do with them? Eliminate them? Is that what you do? I mean, how do you handle that? That's the problem.
It's hard. On that note, just there's a challenge with biohacking and like with birth and whatnot. If you want to preserve life, are you able to like define life? And let's say fixing an embryo that's predisposed to have a child with some sort of traumatic deformity or something like that. People talk about that. Like, is it playing God, or should we try to do the greater good for the most people?
Not only that, just look around. There's a lot of people that are just a piece of shit, right? And it's like, great thing about America is you have the right to be a piece of shit. You don't have to be this like perfect person. You have the right to make mistakes and, be a crappy person if you want to be a crappy person. But if you have some sort of system that's already predetermined what's best for everyone, then what do you do with those people? Yeah.
And in a free society like America, the system only functions best in the long term if the majority of the people, of its components inside, are operating good-hearted people, right? So that's the argument with freedom of speech and allowing the marketplace of ideas to take place, is that's presupposed that the marketplace is full of mostly good ideas. Like, you don't have 60% of idiots that could destroy the world winning out. It's like, no, you have 99.999% of people, might not be perfect. They have their good and bad days, but over time, it's going to remain good. And the small number of people, they're the ones who hopefully their DNA leaves Earth over time.
Have you seen the movie Idiocracy?
No.
Oh, watch it. Basically, it's where like everybody becomes so, like, a guy goes into the future and he's not even like a smart guy, but he's like a super genius in the future because everybody's dumb.
Yeah.
I think AI might think that's our future and try to do something about it. That's the only fear I have, because people are people regardless on their abilities or whatever their beliefs. I don't know if a machine will understand that part of it.
Yeah. Well, let's become better over time. No matter where you come from, if the shit that we go through when we're young adolescents and we can't control our parents and they couldn't control their parents, and since the beginning of time that's been happening. Now that we have technology and the ability to communicate and know what's going on all around the world, I think we're going through growing pains, and we're gonna become a better collective consciousness over time. And we have to do that before the robots take over.
Yeah.
because they're coming.
Hopefully we see the positive time in our lifetime, because there's going to be a lot of backlash before that happens,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Grant,
Yeah.
can you, just to close it off, can you play that third link? So second to the right, or the third YouTube link? Yeah, that one. I just want to finish it off with Elon Musk.
There's a whole generation coming through who seem really sad about the future. What would you say to them?
Well, I think if you want the future to be good, you must make it so. Take action to make it good, and it will be.
If you want the future to be good, you must make it so.
You gotta take action and make it so. That's what he's doing.
And with that being said, talking goes a long way. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.
That's awesome.
Take care, guys.